Hi there and welcome to the Planet Zoo Every Animal Franchise Zoo. Indeed, back again on my journey to squeeze every single animal into this one franchise zoo. Last week we'd hit the E's, so mostly European animals. This week is more of a mixed bag. We've got quite a few tropical animals, but also some temperate and some desert species for today. Picking straight up from last week, there's been no tweaks or changes this week for once. That means it's straight on to the next animal, Formosan Black Bear. Now, I only need 2 bears to meet the social needs, but Formosan Black Bears, they need a heck of a lot of space. So this habitat might be a challenge. Space-wise, I'm gonna need a big area for these two, so how's about this area back here? There's quite a lot of open space here to work with. Yep, I think this will work. Let's get cracking. Bit of an update here. I decided this space I'd picked out wasn't working for the Formosans. They require very steep mountainous terrain, and I think that fits in better over by the cougars and the Dall's sheep over this way. I did start working on something over here, but that isn't the only issue. I've spent probably about 3 or 4 hours at this point on this little cabin here. Now, it's all about the creative process, and I've built this up, I've deleted it, built it up again, deleted it again, and I'm going round in circles. I could have just deleted the footage for this and nobody would ever know that I'd gone through this whole process in my head of figuring out what I actually wanted to do with the space. But I wanted to leave this in just to show the thought process behind what I personally do if I'm having a creative block or I'm working on something that just isn't working for me. What I'll do is I'll persist with an idea for up to a certain point, and if it's still not working, then a clean break, just delete everything and start from scratch is the best option to go with. So yeah, I did delete everything that I'd worked on for ages and started again on this space. To be honest, I don't regret that at all because what I came up with in the end for this design is much better and much more suited for the Formosan than what I had originally. I guess that's my top tip for today. If you're working on something and you've got this gut feeling that it's not working, then don't be afraid to just get rid of it, start with a blank slate. For me, I find this helps me get past a blocker, and the work that comes afterwards is actually a lot more polished and comes along much quicker. Anyway, let me tell you a bit about this build. Formosan Black Bear hails from the mountainous forests of Taiwan. For the build, that meant that I wanted to recreate that very steep mountainous terrain, densely packed with lots of trees and plants and stuff. That creates a bit of an issue because the game loves flatter land for the animals to navigate over. It really struggles when you start adding height and stuff. So I did know going into this build it was going to be a bit of a challenge. My solution for this, there's a huge backstage area for the bears in this build, much bigger than any open space I've left at the back of a habitat before. But this has allowed me to make the bit that the guests can see at the front, it does look in the end like a mountainous forest, definitely. For the Formosans, the habitat's viewable from 2 sides, so right at the front, which is on the main pathway, then I've added this extra little path that goes right up to the back of the zoo. You may have noticed earlier me putting 2 paths in here, and that's because this is going to back onto another habitat of a similar species that's coming up rather soon. My initial reason from moving the space that I'd chosen out originally for this habitat, I moved it because I thought of this other animal in mind. I was like, oh, those 2 habitats should go together. Once both of them are done, it should fit in really well. Now, Formosans are shy animals. That means I have to protect them from the peering view of the guests. I did a little digging and I looked at some real life habitats, and a cool thing that I saw some of the zoos doing for this is that they build a pathway into like a fake rock wall and it has little viewing windows. So kind of like a bird observation hut, but for bears. I would love to make something that looked almost the same as that, but unfortunately this is a franchise zoo and that would leave guests with a terrible view of the bears. And as we know, in franchise mode, if the guests aren't having a good time, that's going to affect your rating and it's ultimately going to affect your performance and profit. So my way around this, I've kind of gone light mode on it. I've got the rock wall in there, the fake rock wall, and there's viewing windows, but they're much bigger than they would be in real life. Hopefully that should be enough of a balance that the guests aren't going to complain that they can't see very well. Foliage for this enclosure, I won't lie, it was a nightmare. Normally you'll hear me complaining all the time about the fact the animals don't like any foliage. The Formosans are the complete opposite. They want all of the foliage all of the time. It got to a point that I felt physically unable to add more foliage in the front section, so I cheated. I added a bunch of bamboo bushes at the back of the enclosure in the hidden space and just kept pressing that place button like one after the other. There's about 40 bushes back there all placed on top of each other just to get the limit up to what the Formosans want it to be. Saying that, needing too much foliage is a nice problem to have, and it let me get very creative with the stuff at the front of the enclosure. There's so much going on in there, it's brilliant. Let's take a look around the mostly complete Formosan habitat. Really densely populated with plants and trees in here. It's to a point you can barely see all that rock work I spent hours on. Hey ho, it makes the bears happy, so what can you do? Yeah, Mr. Bear, you do like a bit of coverage there, don't you? You're not an easy customer to please, you know. At least it looks like you're enjoying it. All that hard work, obviously worth it for you. So let's see, what do we want to talk about with this enclosure? Let's have a look at the guest viewing points. So up on this corner, this is like the traditional viewing platform for the guests, and through the archway we've got the more hidden side. Oh, just bear in mind I haven't finished this platform yet because I'm waiting until I've put in the other species that's coming in a couple of episodes time on the other side to complete this bit. So yeah, this is only half done at this point, but you can get the gist of it here, can't you? Viewing section hidden within a fake mountainside. So, I think it does look really good actually now I'm looking at it properly. Anyway, yeah, like I say, the rest of that will be completed when I've put the other habitat in, which I've looked and I think it's going to be 1 or 2 episodes from now. The walkway will be built up way more than it is currently. Ooh, look, hey, bears checking out the hill on top of the little den I've put in there. The bears have been in here literally about 5 minutes before I've started the tour, so yeah, they are trying to find their surroundings in here as well, sniffing out all of the different nooks and crannies. I did forget to mention that I've put a cave in here for them. In the wild, Formosans will bed down in caves and tree holes, apparently. I've no idea what a tree hole is, but we certainly don't have trees big enough to make a hole in them to allow the bears in there, so we've got a little cave underneath. On top of this is some climbing frames, and this is literally just to fulfill the climbing needs for the Formosans. They don't have a lot of climbing needs, not like some of the cats and stuff in games, so this one platform was enough to fulfill that. Lovely view up here for them. Sit out here and watch the cougars or something. Anyway, I'd say that's the outside portion of this habitat. That's what I've been up to. We can take a quick tour of the inside bit, I guess. This is my secret shame, I suppose you'd say. To fulfill the environment needs, they needed so many plants that I resorted to just dumping a load of bamboo bushes out here. To be fair, it goes on a percentage of size of the habitat, and because I've made this habitat so big, that's the reason why I had to do that. Inside here, I've got a huge backstage area, and this is very empty indeed in here on purpose. This is empty space that I needed to put in so that I was able to put so much rock work at the front. Most of that is not navigable by the bears, so to make up the space requirements, I've had to put it all at the back here, as well as the unsightly bushes. Anyway, that's the Formosans in. Let's move on to the next animal. Next up is the Fossa, so a Madagascan animal, tropical. You know, an evil thought here. Oh, if only I could get them close to the lemurs. Predator and prey living side by side, eh? That'd be great. Hey ho, there's not enough room there, so there's a few tropical animals coming up, and there's plenty of space in this top corner here where I could just start grouping some of the biome animals together. For the Fossa habitat, I've worked on quite a few Fossa habitats in the last couple of weeks after the launch of the Tropical Pack. That means I've played around with different styles up to this point, and I felt like I wanted to do something different with this one. I took a look at some Madagascan architecture for this to see if I could incorporate that into the build. There was a few different styles I could see from various parts of Madagascar, and it all depends. If you're in a city or a town, there's going to be very French influenced architecture there. What I did notice, when you get more into the outskirts of towns and you're more into farmland and traditional buildings in the wilderness, that goes back to roots really, and it's the mud buildings with the thatch roofs over that side. The real life buildings are strikingly similar to the mud walls that we get in game, so I saw that as an opportunity to explore what I could do with those pieces. The end result is a fairly simple build, way less complicated than what I was working on for the Formosan Bear. The Fossa's quite undemanding, they like a little bit of climbing space, they don't need a lot of room. They are a very shy animal though, so you have to bear that in mind and make sure you've got that one-way glass in. With that in mind, I've split this into two parts, so half hard shelter and half outside space. There's plenty of windows, so guests get a good view whether they're looking at the outside part or the indoors part. And it's all enclosed and covered up, so the Fossas shouldn't be getting stressed with this build. So, finished Fossa habitat up and running. It's quite a traditional build. A medium-sized mud wall and thatched roof hard shelter. If we take a look in here, I've split the space about 50-50, so half of this is under the hard shelter and half of it is open in the outside bit. I did spend a little time building a bit of a sleeping quarter here for them. I've checked this and they can jump up here, so a nice little quiet space for them to have a sleep. The outside portion, well, it's rather basic. The Fossas don't like a lot of vegetation, so kind of limiting, and yeah, it is what it is. Overall, I'd say this is an okay habitat. It's not my best work, certainly, but sometimes I have to remember that this is a franchise zoo and we've got a specific objective in mind. And oh no, how did you get out here? Well then, something's gone wrong. Give these animals an escape route and they will find it straight away. So back in the habitat with you where you belong, and I guess we'll figure out where you got out. I don't understand. There's no warning of an escape here. So how are you doing it? I saw you jump in this corner, so it's got to be something in this corner, isn't it? Oh, there we go. Physics-defying leap there. Yeah. Okay, right. We'll figure something out with that then. Right, so I've flattened the land a little bit, I've raised the barrier an inch or two as well, and fingers crossed, looks like they can't escape anymore. Although if they're anything like the Amur leopards, it'll be fine now, and then in a couple of weeks they can escape again. We'll have to wait and see for that one, won't we? Fun and games out the way, time for next animal. Oh yay, I love this one, Galapagos tortoise. Oh, they're so fun, really easy to build for. They're confident animals, so not going to get shy or scared by the guests. Oh yeah, looking forward to this one. Galapagos tortoises, they're from islands off the coast of South America in the Pacific, so a tropical species. With that in mind, I've developed another, it's half a hard shelter and half open for the tortoises here. To be honest, I've probably given them more room than they actually need for this enclosure because, well, trying to fill the space here. Instead of going for another plain square building, I've decorated this a little more than I have with some of the other hard shelters. Gone with a little bit of a South American influence on this one. For the tortoises, for the outside space, you've got to be mindful that they can't climb up anything particularly high, so it's a relatively flat habitat on the outside here. To liven things up a bit, I've used the what's it called, the rustic wall piece that's like the stone piece that came with the Europe pack. This is great for adding a stone texture to the flooring here without having to use the actual rock pieces, which the tortoises could potentially have a problem getting over. I have added a little bit of rock work because I imagine coming from an island on the South Pacific, it would be quite rocky, but just being careful how much I was adding, making sure it was only around the corners that they potentially probably couldn't get around that side anyway. I guess having made this slightly bigger than the tortoises would need room-wise anyway, that's helped and been a little beneficial, adding the rocks and stuff as well. I wasn't worried at any point with this build if I'd run out of room or not. So here we go, Galapagos tortoises in. It's definitely filled the space here really nicely, fits in really well in this little corner here. Guests are already flocking here. They do get a great view because I haven't had to use any of the screening and stuff. The Galapagos tortoises aren't shy animals. They are okay with humans, which is fantastic. They really are a great all-round species to add for your zoo. They're popular, they're adorable, and they're really easy to build for. I mean, I think this is quite a nice build, and it probably took a quarter of the time it took me to build the Formosan habitat. So yeah, thumbs up from me for putting these tortoises in your zoo. Just noticed the water pipe's on a hill. Have to check they can get up that. Anyway, hard shelter. I think this is probably what took the most time with this build. It's not in any particular style. I kind of used some of the South American pieces just because that's quite tropical looking. There is a guest viewing window here that if they're so inclined, they can watch them sleeping on the bedding inside there. Not really much to say about the inside. I am guilty as charged of really not caring that much about doing the inside space. I think we're ready for the next animal. We've got the Gemsbok. This is African desert animal, and 5 of these little ones needed for the social group there. So, hopefully we've got space, because I want to put these right next door to the fennec fox, which is also African desert animal, so kind of fits in. And I reckon I'm going to try to make this look like one building, so both hard shelters are going to look like they belong to one group of buildings. The Gemsbok's one of those animals that I don't have a lot of experience building for them in Planet Zoo. I think they're generally one of the overlooked species in the game, and I've got to say, building this enclosure for them has really opened my eyes to how versatile they can be, and they're quite a good species to add to the zoo considering how much room they take up and the requirements for their enclosure and stuff like that. If I'm honest, I don't think I've ever placed a Gemsbok in my zoo before. The only time I would have built a shelter for them would have been when I was creating the starter habitat. Obviously, I did one for every animal in the zoo, so of course there is a habitat I've built for them somewhere out there, but I'm guessing it probably wasn't very good either. The idea for the layout of this habitat was really based on looking at what I did for the fennec fox and making it fit in with that enclosure, but tweaking it slightly as well to fit in for the Gemsbok. Considering there's 5 of them needed for the social group, I assumed I would need way more room than they actually do need. I always assume with the game any grazing animals are going to take up a lot of room, but I've been surprised on a few occasions developing this zoo that not all of them do need all that space. The bongo, for instance, when I put that in, I thought it'd need more room than it does and fits in really well in a little corner of the zoo as well. Whether this is realistic or not, this doesn't really feel like a lot of room, so I would imagine maybe real zoos would give them a little more room to move about than I've done here. But the golden rule with what we're doing in this zoo is it's a franchise zoo and we do what the game needs us to do and barely any more than that. One thing I did notice with the Gemsbok, I tried to put in some rock work in the middle of this enclosure and the Gemsboks really don't like that at all. It created these massive gaps around the rock work, even if it was sunk right into the ground. So yeah, they obviously couldn't get past it, and that created some problems with the space. So I took that out and we've got plain land here instead. That would have been a nice to have and could have given a little more depth to this habitat, but I can live with it the way it is. Considering how easy the Gemsboks are to keep happy, I wouldn't worry about that too much. The other point with the Gemsbok is that they are shy animals, so again we've had to go with the one-way barrier so that they don't get too scared and stressed when there's guests about. Since I'd already made a custom barrier that was perfect for this with the fennec fox, I've just reused that again and it kind of alleviated that issue. So here's the finished result. A very quick build, this one, mostly because I'm reusing the style that I'd already developed with the fennec fox, and it really does look like this is just attached to the back of the fennec fox habitat. It looks like it's part of the same building cluster. I have to say, Gemsbok is a really underrated animal. I've enjoyed building this, and look how pretty they are. The space seems absolutely ideal for them. About the only thing, I did expand the hard shelter out a little at the back there because they're okay with space as they are, but I figured there's going to be offspring coming along, isn't there? And as soon as we're adding more to here, it could have run out of room. Thanks, game, for raining just at the wrong moment. Get ready for the FPS drop. Wonder what the Gemsbok think of the rain. Being desert animals, I'm guessing they're not really a fan of it, yeah? Anyway, that is the Gemsbok habitat in. So a nice mix of big and small habitats gone in today. Some issues with a creative block at the beginning, but I got friendly with the bulldozer feature, and hopefully you agree that was a worthwhile endeavour. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the continued development of this crazy scheme. I'll catch you in the next one.